planks of the boat were fitted together using the construction technique sought by Shelley and Kurt, in which notched pieces of wood interlock. Once the boards were joined, they were submerged in water, which caused the
This is the account of a salvage operation in the mid-1980s on the Sea of Galilee during an exceptionally low tide. The boat is 9 meters long, 2.5 meters wide, and a little over a meter deep. It was built about 2,000 years ago. A team of experts monitor it constantly to protect it from the risk of rapid deterioration. Gathering data is not easy because the narrow space makes it very difficult even to see. The boat is preserved in a climate-controlled environment and is protected by sophisticated instruments. Scholars from all over the world still flock to the site to analyze the boat's planks, which are made of oak and Lebanon cedar. They've given the vessel many names: the boat of Gennesareth, the boat of Magdala, the boat of Galilee, the boat of Jesus. Who it really belonged to, no one knows. What is important is its discovery, because it is evidence of a traditional activity on the Lake of Tiberias in the 1st century after Christ. The boat was by now far out on the lake. Jesus began to teach the crowds from the boat. The disciples of Jesus wanted him to get into the boat. In the Gospels, the words lake and boat frequently occur together, sketching out a picture of the tiny world of the fishermen whom Jesus associated with from the very beginning of his public ministry. His proposal is simple, direct. Follow me. In exchange, Jesus offers something which will allow people with no status in the world of his time to become the central figures of a new story, one which extends beyond the limits of time and space, even beyond the limits of earthly existence. So let us begin here, with this lake that still preserves the traces of an event that changed the destiny of the world, with this mirror of water nestled between the Golan Heights and the hills of Lower Galilee, the Lake of Kinnereth in the Old Testament, the Sea of Galilee or the Sea of Tiberias in the Gospel narratives. 20 kilometers long, 13 kilometers at its widest point, 250 meters below sea level. This detailed information is necessary if we are to give a concrete perspective to the events which took place 2,000 years ago. Perhaps it is a way of helping us to better hear a voice, his voice.
Our journey begins in the Tabqa region. The land slopes from the inland areas down to the lake, almost to the outskirts of Capharnaum, a city often visited by Jesus. Halfway between the coast and the mountains, this area has been identified since early Christian times as the site of the multiplication of the loaves.
Et je viens ici dans le 2e ustensile. Et ça, c'est enterré jusque là.
Modern-day pilgrims follow an itinerary very similar to that of their first-century counterparts.
Jusque là. Il y a 2 poutres et une transversale.
Someone reads aloud an account written many centuries ago. Its author is a woman known as Egeria.
Only 300 years had passed since the death of Jesus. The holy places had already become the objects of rival claims or plundering. Oral tradition tended to propagate accounts of the life of Jesus that were at times colored by legend. Egeria's record, similar to a journal in style, reaches out to us across the ages, speaking of the cross of Golgotha, the sites of the Passion, Jerusalem and Antioch, eventually leading us all the way back to the Tapka. Her narrative is a carefully drawn map of faith. It was here, perhaps not far from these ancient millstones, or perhaps here among these brightly colored fields, that Jesus, withdrawing by boat to a lonely place, took pity on the people who had followed after him on foot and worked a great miracle.
There is a small boy here with 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what is that among so many? Asked Andrew, the brother of Simon Peter. They all ate as much as they wanted, about 5,000 men, to say nothing of the women and children, the evangelist Matthew recounts.
In the year 670 A.D., several centuries after the visit of Egeria, another pilgrim, Arculfus, described the scene reduced to ruins.
Built on the remains of a Byzantine church, the interior of the sanctuary today contains an icon of Jesus with his hand raised in blessing. It is an eloquent depiction of a presence to which crucial episodes of the Gospel bear witness. Nearby, a picture of Mary completes a moment of meditation that solemnly invites us to prayer.
This restored floor mosaic offers us a vivid pictorial narrative of life around the lake. The battle with the sea, the dangers of navigation, and the world of the fishermen blend with scenes of plant and animal life to form a picture that could well belong to our own time. A 5th century mosaic depicts 2 fish and a basket of bread, a reference to the miracle that took place there. And they carried away 12 baskets full of leftovers, says the evangelist Matthew. Cameras flash as pilgrims seek to forge a link with the miraculous event. The carefully preserved rock is like many others scattered around the lake shore. Egeria's words seem to take on greater immediacy here.
It is customary for new arrivals to say a prayer here, because the stone on which the Lord laid the bread has become an altar.
The land slopes gently down to the lake. Just a few steps off the path, ancient trails wind through the fields. Further below, an amphitheater and church offer rest and refreshment. Here too, archaeologists have based their explorations on Egeria's meticulous account, the accuracy of which has been confirmed by recent excavations.
The lake is quiet, its more distant waters lost in thickets of reeds. A flock of birds takes flight. Our gaze lifts to the hillsides, which are gently reflected in little inlets of water. It's hard to believe that the southwesterly winds that blow down from the mountains can cause storms, violent ones like those described by the evangelists. The landscape suddenly changes, taking on harsh tones. The water becomes menacing, like on the open sea, announcing that a great storm of wind is on the way. The waves washed over the boat, swamping it, Mark tells us. A group of pilgrims collect smooth pebbles as souvenirs of their visit. They bring to mind Simon and Andrew, James and John, who stood on this very shore as Jesus began his ministry in Galilee.
"I will make you fishers of men," Jesus said. And immediately they left their nets and followed him.
Off to the side, a church rises steeply above the water. Called the Shrine of the Primacy of Peter, its dimensions are modest, its design simple. The outcrop, around which the shrine was built, has been carefully preserved and looks just as it did 2,000 years ago. Following a path worn into the rock, the faithful circle the altar and leave messages of hope.
"Come and eat," said Jesus. The altar is inscribed with the words Mensa Christi, the table of Christ. John's gospel is drawing to an end. The net, dragged ashore, is once again bursting with fish. Another miraculous catch, the final one, has just taken place. Christ manifests himself here for the last time. "Feed my lambs," he says to Peter. The impetuous and unpredictable disciple is chosen to become the new shepherd after him.
"Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these do?" Jesus asks. "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" he repeats. "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" he asks a third time. "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you."
Peter's courageous profession of love transcends his human frailty. This man who, out of fear, denied his master 3 times, is charged with a responsibility that will launch a new story. "Follow me," Jesus concludes.
Even here, the signs of mass tourism are evident. In the tree-lined square that serves as a parking lot, tour buses exploit to the maximum the little space available. Many people only have time for a brief visit, the length of which is almost always determined by the local guide. Visitors enter the church that stands on the summit of the hill. Its interior is austere. Rows of arches and pillars alternate with windows inscribed with the words of the evangelists Luke and Matthew. A semicircular portico allows visitors to admire the mirror of water below and to enjoy a moment of meditation.
On the nearby hill is a cave. Jesus climbed above it and from there proclaimed the Beatitudes.
Once again, the words of the early pilgrim Egeria help us to recapture the atmosphere of the time. Today, it is thought that Jesus spoke higher up on the hill where a large church crowns the summit. But the feelings are the same, accentuated by the hills of Galilee and the majestic view of the lake. A time apart, destined to remain fixed in the heart of every pilgrim, an indelible memory for anyone who wants to better remember the liberating message of Jesus, his definitive words. The landscape slopes sharply down to the lake. Everything is permeated with an atmosphere of serenity. The spot is ideal for prayer and reflection, the reading of the sacred texts, and dialogue with one's neighbor.
Happy are those who are ready to make allowances and to forgive. They will know the love of God.
Groups of the faithful gather together to worship. Everyone listens attentively, seeking to capture some echo of the words of the Master so as to gain new wisdom and new courage.
They will be known to be doing God's work.
The silence that pervades the atmosphere is barely disturbed by the rustling of leaves and the prayers recited in different languages. It's not difficult for a person to nourish feelings of simplicity, goodness, happiness, and willingness, at least for a while. In this place we seem to hear the voice of Jesus once again, said Pope Paul VI when he visited this spot as a pilgrim. Certainly, his voice was stronger, sweeter, more awesome 2,000 years ago. It was the voice of God. But the good news he proclaimed to everyone is still relevant, unchanged after 2,000 years of history.
From the earliest centuries, Christians have wondered where the Sermon on the Mount actually took place. Perhaps it was delivered in the mountainous area around Capharnaum. The most recent scientific research lends credence to the testimonies of first-century pilgrims. However, tradition and science, chronicle and archaeology offer various options. The debate is still open because, in fact, Jesus could have proclaimed his Beatitudes from any of the surrounding hills. Artists of every age and every sensibility have depicted this event on the walls of countless basilicas. Matthew sets the scene for us.
Seeing the crowds, Jesus went up the hill. There he sat down and was joined by his disciples.
Jesus begins to speak. His subject is happiness, a happiness that lasts forever. In every age, happiness is difficult to achieve. At times, it is not found at all. Jesus refers to a present time that reaches far beyond the hillside, clearing, and lake spread before him. His words take on substance in our own time. Poverty, hunger, pain, persecution, the situations he speaks about are in direct contrast to a happy life. But he also promises a kingdom, the kingdom of heaven. How many people listen to the words of the Master? How many climb that hillside, clutching their few belongings? There was a large crowd, Luke tells us, a great multitude of people from all parts of Judea, from Jerusalem, and from the coastal regions of Tyre and Sidon, bringing together a wealth of human situations in which those who came to be cured of their diseases joined their voices to those tormented by impure spirits.
How happy are the poor in spirit. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven, Matthew records. Happy you who are hungry now, you shall be satisfied, says Luke. Happy those who mourn, they shall be comforted. Happy the gentle, they shall have the earth for their heritage. Happy those who hunger and thirst for what is right, they shall be satisfied. Happy the merciful, they shall have mercy shown them. Happy are you when people persecute you. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward will be great in heaven.
Are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 pennies? And yet not one of them is forgotten by God.
The words of Jesus are challenging, emphatic, and yet at the same time serene. They express a reality to be found at the heart of every human experience. Jesus promises something astonishing, hard to understand, something destined to leave an indelible mark on history and on the hearts of human beings. The life of every person is about to change, is about to be turned upside down by the offer of an unconditional and unlimited love. A love so total and absolute that it seems to be an impossible dream.
Happy are you when people persecute you. Happy are you when people hate you, drive you out.
The colors of the lake, the small waves that lap at the shore, the outlines of the hills, the last rays of the setting sun, are all the same as they were back in those days. Although many people listened to his words, perhaps only a few took them to heart. The small door and the narrow path he spoke about may have seemed to be impossible choices in the light of the concrete situations of daily life. What will we eat? What will we drink? What will we wear? Human beings continue to worry about these needs.
Jesus carried out his mission without pause. In the markets of Gaza and Jaffa, in the narrow streets of the port of Caesarea, merchants and fishermen listened to a new message. The events that took place by the lake are openly discussed in the neighborhoods of Nazareth and in the streets of Capernaum. Word of the event reaches far afield, even to the plain of Esdraelon, the obligatory route for those traveling north or south through Galilee and Samaria. It reaches peasants in isolated villages and is recounted by shepherds as they stop to rest in the hills. It reaches the ears of artisans and merchants as they go about their daily business.
The words of Jesus echo in the Decapolis, east of the Jordan. They are discussed in the shade of the colonnade of Gerasa and heatedly debated by vendors in the square of Gadara. The words of Jesus are repeated with wonder. Sometimes they are ridiculed, sometimes defended. For some people, it's just another story to be shared with one's neighbor. For others, it conveys a message that merits reflection. The story spreads far and wide, to the borders of the country, to the edge of the desert, to the heart of what is now Jordan, to the caravan stop and commercial trade center of Pella, to the luxurious villas of Philadelphia.
It's a difficult moment. The religious authorities in Jerusalem are the ever more jealous guardians of orthodoxy. The Romans are vigilant because anything can happen where there is unrest and confusion, and when the people are less willing to tolerate oppression. In the synagogues, the liturgy concludes with the heartfelt prayer, "May God's reign extend throughout your lifetime, and may this reign be established soon." The time has come. Repent and believe the good news Jesus proclaims from Galilee. The long wait is over. Jesus looks around him and offers his listeners examples: the fishnet, the vine, the cultivated fields. His message is concrete, rooted in the everyday reality of the people: planting, the harvest, the changing seasons, the rural life, the stories recounted by the lakeside, the risks of the fishing trade. He uses every means to proclaim the word so far as his listeners were capable of understanding it. He makes comparisons, quotes wise sayings and proverbs, recounts parables.
Jesus speaks to the ordinary people of his time, the same type of people that we see every day, nameless people with unknown life stories. But back then, like today, those unfamiliar faces hide rich people, shrewd administrators, crafty individuals, magistrates with no sense of justice or humanity, highwaymen who rob travelers, and passers-by who refuse to help these victims, wicked and lazy servants. The poor and the lame are invited to the banquet to replace the guests who refuse to attend it. The shepherd goes looking for the lost sheep, leaving the other 99 in the desert. To all the members of the human race, Jesus proposes a new message in uncompromising terms. Say yes when you mean yes, and no when you mean no. His language is that of the common person, and yet he teaches with authority. His energy and activity are inexhaustible.
As long as the day lasts, I must carry out the work of the one who sent me. The night will soon be here when no one can work. I will make you fishers of men, Jesus says to Peter, Andrew, James, and John. And his disciples leave their homes and work to share his wandering life. Foxes have holes, and the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Provide yourselves with no gold or silver, not even with a few coppers for your purses, with no haversack for the journey, or spare tunic or footwear, or a staff. His preaching ministry is a brief one. He is accepted and criticized, tolerated and persecuted. What happens to the seeds that fall on the side of the road, or to those that fall among the stones or thorns? What happens to the farmer who discovers a treasure hidden in his field? When is the right time to pull the weeds and burn them, and to gather the wheat into the barn? Jesus refers to objects and situations drawn from everyday life. His words appeal to human reason, compelling his listeners to make a clear choice. I am standing at the door, knocking. If one of you hears me calling and opens the door, I will come in to share your meal side by side with you.